In this video, I'm going to introduce to you the concept of composition. And this is one of my favorite parts of the course because this is going to show you how to create an image essentially from nothing. So what is composition? Composition essentially means putting it all together. And it's a combination of combining different elements of a shot with certain principles that teach you how to align all of those elements together into one. So in the next 14 videos, I'm going to break down to you the 7 elements of design and the 7 principles of art. And I know that sounds fairly intense, but they're actually really easy. So let me give you a brief overview of each one. So let's start with the 7 elements of design. These are essentially like the puzzle pieces of your image. So these are the subjects, the foregrounds, the backgrounds, all of the components that put an image together to create something that you want. So these 7 components are line, shape, color, texture, value, form, and space. And I'm going to show you each of these individually in different videos and show you what to look for within each different concept. Following those videos, we're going to go over the 7 principles of art. And if the 7 elements of design are like the pieces of the puzzle that you're looking for, then the 7 principles of art are going to show you how to put all those pieces of the puzzle together. So these 7 principles are balance, contrast, and pattern, movement, proportion, and variety, and finally harmony. So the reason I want to break it down this way is because I want to show you how composition is really broken down in its most bare bones format. A lot of photographers out there will go and say, use the rule of thirds, or use a triangle to create a certain kind of shape, or use a leading line. And sure, I'm going to go through those within these videos, but I want to give you a really skeletal structure of how to compose a composition from the bare bones of nothing. So this is going to teach you exactly how composition works, and I'm really excited to show you. So for the next part of this video, I wanted to run you through a few tips to go over to keep in the back of your head when you're searching through a composition. The first is to start with one element and one principle. So I know all of those 14 concepts can sound intense, and if you're out there trying to remember what they all are while you're in the field and trying to balance them all together, it can get a little intimidating, especially if you're fresh into photography. So my recommendation would be to start with one principle and one element and see how you can combine them. For example, look for a line and see how it can demonstrate movement. And then as you get more advanced with being able to pair them together and which ones go well together, you could start to stack multiple of them together. And this is where you start to get the really crazy images, because subconsciously people understand all of these concepts, these elements, and these principles in their head, but they don't see them technically broken down on a piece of paper like I'm showing you today. So we're going to construct them so that people's minds can enjoy them in a way that they don't even realize. The next tip I have is to shoot with a singular focal length. And this could teach you how to get really good with a certain type of shot. And it could also, again, reduce the amount of overwhelming things to manage while you're out shooting. So for example, say just today, I'm only going to shoot with a 35mm. So even if you have a zoom lens, lock it on 35 and don't go to any other lengths. This is going to make your job significantly easier because you're going to be forced to look into a single perspective and get used to it and figure out what its quirks are. Once you do this with a bunch of different focal lengths and you're comfortable with them, you could start to use the zoom lens as you're supposed to. So zoom in, zoom out, know what types of shots are good for what. So essentially what I'm trying to do here is just reduce the amount of thinking you have to do when you go out. This course has a ton of information, and starting really small with singular things and stacking them later on once you get better at them is really the path to success. Another tip I have is to walk around with your phone when looking for compositions. So again, this kind of falls into the working with a singular focal length. If you just use your phone to position things and see what looks good, this can make your job easier, especially because setting up a tripod can be a pain. You have to adjust all the legs, level it out, get the ball head correct, and walking around and doing that can take a lot of time. So if you're just searching for a composition with your phone, you can just generally see what looks good through a screen and then go from there. One last tip I have before we get into all of these different concepts is timing. So there's a pretty big argument within the landscape photography community if you stay at a singular composition or if you move around. And there's different perks to either side. And by this I essentially mean, say you show up an hour before sunset and you find a great composition. Do you just leave your camera there and wait for sunset to happen, or do you continue to actively search for other compositions? And my answer to this is, how much do you like to gamble? If you want to keep it in that singular composition, you're betting on the fact that the light's gonna hit that composition perfectly. You never know what the weather's gonna do. A cloud can suddenly roll in and direct the light 50 feet to the left of where you thought your perfect camera was gonna be. So if you spent all that time in one spot just waiting for that scene and then it doesn't happen, you just wasted a ton of time. So one way I like to mitigate this is, for one, you could bring multiple cameras out, but this is a bit of a pain. It's a lot to carry, it's expensive. And then you just set one tripod up, it's ready to go. And then with your other camera, you look for other compositions. The best way I've found to do this though is, once you find a composition you like, you set your tripod up in that composition. And then all you have to do is click your camera on and click your camera off. Then you could walk around with your camera and look for other compositions. If you find something better, then you can move your tripod. But you know your tripod's locked into that position and ready to go if the light starts hitting that position perfectly. So this is a great way to save a composition for later while you're actively still looking for things to shoot while the sun is in the process of setting. So don't get too focused on staying on one scene, and be flexible, but also if the light's hitting really hard, you might not want to move. If you think you have a good shot, it's all lined up, the light's hitting it, there could be a tendency to be like, there's something better 10 feet to the left and you're not sure. I would just stick with it unless you're really trying to gamble here, because you honestly never know what's gonna happen. It could be better and it could be worse. And I've honestly had both situations. So it's really up to your intuition in the moment. All right, so let's go ahead and start with these 14 concepts. Again, I'm gonna start with the elements of design first, and then I'm gonna go into the principles of art after that.